All right. What's up, guys? Tmanplays here. And yeah, it's been a while since I've done a tier list video. So that's what we're doing today. And this is actually my tier list in front of you right now. We're not going to go through the whole thing of moving them to the S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, etc. Because last time it took me 3 hours, and I'm really not trying to go 3 hours today. So going to be a much shorter video. I'm just going to quickly kind of go through why I think each division uh, deserves its certain tier. So first off, with 11th Cav here, I currently believe it has the strongest opener in the game with the A10 rush. You just pair your A10s with a quick fix. You can also run some other helicopters with it. You have your shotgun ASFs, which perfectly can defend those A10s. Very, very hard to stop. And some divisions really just can't do anything about it. Some divisions you can test it with air, and the shotgun ASFs usually kill your planes fairly easily. It's all RNG based air opener, and it generally goes in favor of the A10s with the shotgun ASFs. So I think that one is definitely the best division in the game. You can also not do the A10 opener. I played it plenty on stream, not doing A10 openers, and had very great success with it just because you can play it like a normal div, and you'll always have kind of the mind games going against your opponent where they're thinking like, hey, is this guy going to do an A10 opener against me? And they spend so much points in AA that you can just kind of roll them on the ground. Uh, Secondly, third armored here, really, really strong div in 1v1 at the moment. Um, Basically, you have chaparrals, you have stingers, you have F-15s, perfectly covers your ground forces. You have plenty of infantry. You get really good IFEs with the Bradleys, with the 25 pen that can basically just uh, be a threat against any opponent armor. And you get really good helicopters with the Apaches. You get pretty good recon. There's not really anything you're lacking with third armored here. And in most matchups, you just kind of play it a little bit slower, but you end up kind of rolling the opponent around like the 20-minute mark or so. 27th, the only pack division that I think is actually S tier at the moment, just because BMP3s are so good. I'm going to say it again, BMP3s are so good. Basically, you just put some recon out in front, get a death blob of BMP3s, and some T80 BVs kind of mixed in. Maybe some of your really good like Strela 10M3s to cover you against helicopters and attack aircraft. And then you just kind of move that blob around while your recon spots everything, and you just insta delete everything in your path. Really, really, probably the strongest division on airport right now. If you face 27th on airport, pretty much a death sentence. Very, very strong pack div. The only one I think is S tier. And then our last US div, 8th Infantry in S tier. Um, Very, very strong as well. You can kind of play it multiple different ways. I've tried mechanized playstyles with M60s, kind of backed with like Bradley Recon, then like your high HP Dragon units, some Rangers maybe mixed in if you're going CQC. You kind of can do the mech playstyle, or you can go for the heavy M1A1s, back them up with chaparrals, get some LGB planes to destroy like your opponent's really good infantry at the start. Um, it kind of fits everything into it. Like you could just do multiple things with it. I've had games where I've traded absolutely terribly with eighth, and it still felt like I was just absolutely dominating, which was uh, one of the reasons why I think it's definitely an S tier dip, because even if you trade bad, you can just keep printing out these really good units to hold the lines, like your Bradleys, your M1A1s. You get some decent LGBs, good cluster plane, tow cobras, regular cobras. Like it's a very well rounded div that pretty much has all the tools that you need. So that's why I think it's S tier. Now we go to A tier with 5E. Really good at dealing with most infantry divisions in the game. such as things like 101st, 56th. It's pretty good against 4th. It's really good against Berlin Command, really good against TKS. You kind of get the picture there. Anything that's an infantry div, 5E is basically the perfect counter for because of the AMX 30B2s with the autocannons. They do a real number against high HP infantry squads. And it's kind of the same with 27th. You kind of get the def blob of your AMXs and just kind of roll those around, and then you just kind of insta delete and stun up any infantry that's like firing dragons or metas at you. Your tanks will have less HP, so you kind of have to be very aggressive with this div compared to others. Like you can't just kind of sit back and slowly push your enemy. You gotta really kind of go aggressive with your AMXs at the start, like your Sir Blendes and whatnot. Get a lot of ground with those, then kind of set up some Milan 2s, get those AMX 30 B2s moving around for infantry positions, and you just kind of work it that way. Not really a big fan of the ASF in the French div. Not really a fan of most of the plane loadouts, like the bomber's too expensive and whatnot. But the AT plane's nice for 195 points. Other than that, it's just a very good anti infantry division. Uh, then we go to Fifth Panzer, which I also think is very much an A tier div because Leo 2A3s absolutely slap. Leo 2A4s slap even harder. You get really good pin on those main guns, basically the same as your Abrams. So they hit very, very hard, and you can basically buy a tank every single income tick because those 2A3s cost 235 points. The 2A4s, I believe, cost 265, so 5 points above 1 minute income. But basically, you just kind of blob those tanks together as average blob enjoyer has shown plenty of times. You just create kind of the death blob of those 2A3s, and then you engage your opponent, hopefully, in like 1 versus 3 situations, and just instantly destroy their tanks, instantly destroy other armor as well. Just don't want to get side shot because you will pay the price if you get side shot because I believe they only have 6 side armor, which most ATGMs can one shot you with the 6 side armor there. Like a basic Conquerors can even side shot you and kill you in 1 hit. So you want to just basically stack those 2A3s with the rolling threes and basically attack that way. Really good air as well with the F4s right now. Also, just your availability on all your air is really good. You got the MW1 as well for your anti infantry like blobs. The rocket plane is actually really good with the 4 availability as well. I've used that a fair bit. Very, very good at just kind of cleaning up infantry out in the open. So then we move on to 82nd. 82nd's always been pretty good. It used to be an S tier div. I don't really think it's S tier anymore. Basically, just because your lav availability got nerfed. You really feel like the lack of fire support in late game situations. Your opener is still like insanely strong, but I've had plenty of games where opponents playing 82nd against me have had like a really dominant opener. Like, they'll take whatever their objective was, they'll stack it with infantry, but then they can't really do much about the artillery that I buy. So you can just slowly wind them down with artillery. They can't really do much to continue to advance to basically, start picking off some of my heavy armor that I can then protect with AA and whatnot. So then the planes kind of become a non-issue. I just really, it's kind of hard to continue to advance with 82nd once your opponent kind of has that defensive line set up. Just because you kind of need your LAVs to like help with fire support, so it's not just your infantry on other infantry because it's going to take too long to advance if you're just running into other infantry. And also, if you're caught out in the open with your infantry and the other infantry's in a building, like you don't want to just run at them across the open. Uh, Helicopters are still good. You only basically get 3 main Apaches though with your Hellfires. So once those go down, it's pretty difficult to deal with opposing armor because your TOE2s can then just be kind of destroyed by artillery and whatnot. 11 easy. I think it's kind of right behind 82nd. I've always had these pretty close in my head. But I think 11 Easy has like the best infantry in the game with the Paras SAS and the Legionnaire Paras. They are quite expensive now, so it can be a little difficult if you lose some on the opener. It can put you in a very bad situation, but as long as your opener is like relatively safe and you don't lose units on your opener and you get them to where you need to get them, it's pretty easy to lock down a zone with 11 Easy. The only problem is like 82nd, when it starts getting to those late game situations, if you lose some of your strike aircraft due to some, RNG, um, it's difficult to get up that fire support to kind of keep your opponent at bay because then you're just having to rely upon your infantry and you're having to move them behind town so that they don't get fire supported. Your artillery's not too great. Your guys aren't really that great because of the low ammo count against like other high HP infantry squads. And with all the high HP infantry squads in the game now, it's getting more difficult for these divisions to basically hold against others. But yeah, you just really feel that lack of fire support. But great plane tab, great for early game. Um, just don't want to get trashed on your opener, or else it's already over because you're not really going to be able to attack too much after it gets past like the 20-minute mark. Second UK, very very good openers with this division. You can basically just do your SAS, covers all your air. You can kind of do like a mech thing with your warriors. And then you have the Chalice to basically kind of just back up all your infantry warriors, etc. You also get really nice air with this, with your phantoms that are pretty cheap, can cover you pretty well, as well as the SAS on the ground. So you're pretty safe from bombing runs when you play second UK. You're also safe from people just running helicopters into your opener because it's you know everyone's gonna know you have SAS. So that's always nice, especially with all the heli rushing currently going around in ranked. Second UK is pretty nice for dealing with that. 82nd as well with the Avengers at the start. Um, but you have like a really good air tab with dealing with heavy armor. You can kind of play later games as well. So maybe you can make a case for second UK being above 82nd and 11E because you have that late game potential with your heavy tanks and you have more fire support than these two divisions. So there's a case to be made there. I just find the infantry a bit lacking overall in this div when it kind of comes to fighting opposing infantry. That's the only thing that kind of hampers it a bit. Like it's more stronger late game, but it kind of it's harder to get your infantry, and your infantry can be expensive with the airmobile and whatnot being 65 points. So that's the reason I kind of have it behind those. Fourth Machutzen, very good opener with the Metis forward deploy. You also have a lot of pretty good two availability armored helicopters that can really help you out. You have a good plane tab with your SUs, your ATs, your bombers are pretty cheap. Um, don't really get a good AT plane. Like your AT plane can be long range, but it has low accuracy. I tend to not really use it. I more so just rely on like basically ATGMs all over the place in this division. T55s kind of help you push, but you kind of fall off after that 25-minute mark or so. Um, but you have a lot of T55s. You have a lot of like good Machutzen, FS Jaeger, all that kind of stuff. Um, so it is still very very solid. And then after that, I have 24th, just due to basically Strike Eagles, very, very good. The infantry, not so great. Not really a fan of the 24th infantry. You can get a lot of cheap, like National Guard Bradleys and stuff to kind of help around everything. But once they kind of, like, especially the National Guard ones, once they get kind of shot at, their accuracy goes way down. So you kind of want a lot of those kind of spread out, and you don't really want them to engage or be fired upon. Just kind of leave them in cover. Maybe just push if your opponent really just has nothing, like no ATGMs to fire at them. It's just the infantry in 24th. I can't really get behind. The M1 IPs are also weaker than M1A ones. So, and any type of like BV 2A3. So as soon as you start going against like heavier tanks, It's kind of hard to make those M1 IPs work for you unless you kind of have the Bradleys moving with it. And you do get a lot of Bradleys. I can't underestimate that enough. You do get a lot of Bradleys, which is why this division is so good, especially when you start to, put in the Strike Eagles and whatnot that can kind of one tap other armor in the game. So that does help you deal with that. And your stuff is all pretty cost efficient. Like your M1 IPs being worse than an M1A1 is not so bad when you look at the price. Like they still get the same armor, but the price is much cheaper at 240 points. So you can kind of build up your forces faster to do these assaults. You don't have to take as much time to kind of combine your forces. And I think that makes this division pretty good. And you get all the other stuff that like these U.S. divisions get, like your chaparrals, your stingers, National Guard Apaches, Cobras, uh, Bradley's, pretty much everything you need, even an eagle. So defending your air is pretty nice. Then we go to 101st, which I played a lot of games of recently. I don't think it's the strongest. I think it's probably low A tier, maybe high B tier. It's kind of both new divisions are kind of in that range for me. I do think 101st is the better of the two, though. Mainly because, for one, I played a few guys playing 101st that have just bought basically all helicopters at the start. And well, if you don't buy enough AA, you're just getting completely rolled by that. Quite a frustrating experience. I don't do that personally, but it's been done against me, and it's been very difficult to deal with. So that does kind of creep it up into the low A tier for me, just because of that. I've also had other games where you get the late game kind of giant helo blob, and yeah, it's still pretty difficult to deal with, especially if you're in a division like a Seventh Panzer or whatnot, where your AA, or like Berlin Command, where your AA is a bit lacking. Very very hard to deal with those Apaches, especially when 101st has the Eagles in the sky and lots of stingers and chaparrals around. It's pretty difficult to deal with that. But the infantry's all good. You get lots of basically free vet, high HP infantry that you can move around. M1 IP is not so bad. I take them at low vet in this division just so that you have more fire support, because you do kind of start to struggle with fire support a little bit if you lose a bunch of your helicopters and whatnot. So I really like having 8 of those M1 IPs to really just kind of start stunning the opposing infantry down, keep them from advancing across the open after you, etc. 56Y, really really strong division. I like the AA because you can basically, has really good anti-helo AA. What I don't like about the AA is it has no long range AA, so you basically get destroyed by air. Every time I play 56Y, it just becomes an unfun experience when you face basically an air heavy deck, because you're just gonna get air spam to death, and it's not it's not very a fun experience with all the RNG that takes place in the air game for me. I really don't enjoy uh, playing it that much because of that. But there are matchups that are nice for it. Um, it can be fun to play as long as you're not getting air spammed, because you do have the high HP infantry. You have kind of lots of fire support. All your stuff's pretty cost efficient. Your T-62s with the long range missiles are nice. You have plenty of BMPs, a lot of recon BMPs as well. You can basically build up like these cool little strike forces pretty efficiently. It's just when it comes to covering them from aircraft, that's kind of where all the problems start, and that's why it's not any higher than low A tier here, because it is pretty easy to exploit that weakness against this division. But then we go into B tier. First, I have 35Y. Um, the big weakness of this division is basically just not having high HP squads. Like you have the Spetsnaz, which are 12 man, but everything else is basically a 7-man squad. And you really kind of feel that weakness, especially if you're trying to assault across the open against other infantry. Like your infantry just doesn't really have a chance. If you get to the buildings and all that before opposing infantry, like yeah, it's nice. You can lock it down with metis and whatnot. But if you're the one having to do the assaulting, It's really not great. You do have ZU trucks to kind of help you in the opener against opposing helicopters and whatnot. You get plenty of metas that you can use to basically destroy IFVs. Your air tab is okay. Like you have good AT planes that can destroy armor. You have a pretty good seed aircraft. You have a lot of MiG 29s, and you really need those MiG 29s because your AA is not going to be great. So you basically have to fly around MiG 29s all the time and hope for the best whenever another plane comes in because it's all RNG basically. So, good luck there. Uh, but I find it to be like 82nd and 11E, whereas after it gets past kind of that 20-25 minute mark, all your fire support has died, like your BMP2s or your BMD2s will basically all be dead at that point. It's very hard to then push because you don't really have anything to destroy opposing infantry very quickly. And it just kind of becomes a giant infantry grind fight. Your opponent maybe then has their heavy tanks up and they just kind of all just start hitting you from range. And you just have to kind of start going max defend mode. Um, so yeah, that's why I have them in B tier. I really think the low HP of their squad really holds them back. Then we have Berlin Command. Major weakness of Berlin Command is just their AA. Uh, Basically, you have your Mistrals, you have Stingers, you have PVEDs, which got nerfed, so they're not as good anymore. Um, you have Harrier AAs. Uh, you can kind of see the problem there. No long range AA, so you can get air bullied pretty easily, just like with 56 here. But you have really good kind of medium armor. Uh, you have your AMXs that you can use with the autocannons to help your infantry. You have really good infantry with this division. You have a few Abrams, some chieftains mixed in there, but the infantry is basically your strength with kind of the mech of like your medium tanks that you can push with it. It's just you got to really worry about the air. You basically use your Nighthawk to basically deal with the opposing armor and whatnot. But if your opponent has long range radar AA, then that can be an issue. The Nighthawk also makes a very distinct noise, and if the opponent's kind of listening out for that, it's slow enough to where if they have a fast fighter, they can just kind of call that out and get you that way. They can also just kind of camp your spawn with fighters. So it's hard to get value out of that Nighthawk if your matchup doesn't really favor you. You can get good matchups though, like matchups against like 11E or like 82nd divisions that don't have radar AA. Then your Nighthawks can do some work. Then you kind of maybe spread out your AA a bit more so they don't camp your back line with a fighter, and then you're looking real good because then your Nighthawk can just do a lot of work. And as long as you can keep those alive, this division's pretty scary, especially as you reach like the later game when there's more stuff going on. It's kind of when I like to use the Nighthawks, not so much maybe like one early, and then if you lose it early, wait for the next one to buy in the late game when there's more happening. So your opponent doesn't really have time to like listen in for it coming out, and you can get more value out of it that way. Second Panzer. Some people think this is like an A tier or an S tier div. Tier list is based on my playstyle, and yeah, second Panzer really just does not fit my playstyle that well at all. I really don't think it's that great. Uh, it's just the forward deploy units at the start. Um, they aren't really that good, to be honest. They really aren't that good. I know they're not special forces or anything, but the eight strength of them really just really doesn't do any wonders for me. I feel like they never kill anything for me, and they just kind of die. Especially if you just kind of send one to an area. They do have a good pen on like their Panzerfaust 3, but I don't know. It's just I really don't like West German infantry. Like it's good with the high HP and all that, but it's just the really doesn't feel like it does the damage. And you only get like 4 2A3s upvetted in this division. You kind of lose them fairly easily if you get them side shot and whatnot, like we were talking about with fifth. Uh, you have plenty of Martyr 1A3s, but I've never really been a fan of the Martyr. I actually play my fifth Panzer without Martyrs in my deck, just because I really don't like the way the Martyr feels compared to like other IFEs. does significantly less damage and it has a significantly less accuracy ATGM, with also significantly less pen at only 17 pen. So I really don't like that IFE. And that's kind of how you need to play second is you, you got to spam out those Martyr 183s. So I just, some people make it work. I really don't like the play style of it. So that's why I have it down here. And same kind of goes for TKS. You could argue it could be higher. It does have a very, very nasty opener with the AMXs, the FS Jaeger B1 Recon, the Green Beret, the little VLRA truck that can stop basically all your opponent's helicopters for 50 points. Then you get your transition kind of into your bombers for 145 points, the high altitude ones that can just kind of delete all your opponent's static emplacements and where they have infantry, and then you can advance from there. Like I played a lot of people that can play TKS very, very well. I don't necessarily play it too well, so just personal preference. I kind of have it at B tier for myself. I've still had like quick games with it though, where you win in like 5, 7 minutes. Um, but it's just not a division that I really enjoy playing. The play style of it, that is, because kind of once you get to the later game, if you haven't really done enough, you basically have no chance of holding on. So it's basically just a GG and surrender at that point. And I don't really enjoy that. I'd rather have a chance to basically come back or like, be able to continue the fight all game long, not just for the opener. But moving on from that, then we have KDA. KDA is pretty strong. Um, you get a lot of high HP spammable infantry, really good artillery. I think the artillery really makes this division good. If you're good at using smirches and just the other artillery in this division, like the Malkas and whatnot, even the BM-24s, but especially the smirches, you can destroy opposing armor very, very efficiently with just like one or two smirches. If you have recon that's able to spot them, just fire like 4 shots on it. The smirch does a lot of damage. I've had people basically destroy blobs of IFVs and tanks just using smirches against me. Um, so yeah, very, very strong unit there. The Napalm Grad probably the strongest though, as especially if you're on a map like Two Lakes, just use that Napalm grad out the opposing town, and then just work your way in from there. Uh, it's very, very good at dislodging infantry, and you just kind of split the salvo. Fire 10 shots there, another 10 shots there, another 10 shots there, another 10 shots there, and you can basically make the whole town on fire. But I think that also is a very, very good like air spam division because you get 6 MiG-21 bombers. You get the AT aircraft as well to help you kind of with the heavy armor. But yeah, you can be very aggressive in the opener with all the high HP infantry, all the bombers, and then the really good artillery kind of helps you out in the late game with your T-62s as well. But from that, we go to 79th, and 79th and 39th I kind of consider the same. 79th, you get the better BV IZDs. Um, but like you really feel the lack of speed in 79th. You don't really have any fast transports for your infantry, and all your infantry isn't really that great because they aren't high HP, right? You don't get a metis. You basically just have to rely on Conkers and BMP twos. Um, you still get cubes, which are good for covering your T80 BV blobs and whatnot. So you'll have that long range AA. But then again, it's all RNG based because the cube only has 40% accuracy, so you can still get kind of bullied if you're not careful. Packed AA isn't really the best. Um, but yeah, you really feel the lack of like your infantry being good, and like the heavy tanks and the BMP2s just don't really feel like enough to kind of like help you win games. Like it feels like you just need something more. And I just feel like you get in these positions where you just kind of like once you build up, you're just kind of there, and you can't really push anywhere because like your infantry just gets melted out in the open because of the low HP, and then I don't know. It's a weird position. Same with 39th. Everything's just like average feeling, if that makes sense. It just feels like you have an average deck that's kind of the best way I can describe it. Nothing's really great. It's just kind of there and you have it. But every time you face an opposing unit that's of like similar quality, you just lose, if that makes sense. That's the best way I can describe 79th and 39th. But then from there we go to 7th Panzer, which is used to be one of my favorite divs. I still like it. I don't really think it's, you know, A tier, S tier. I think it's very, very low B tier, mainly because of the range on the T-72s. Like you really feel it when you're going against BVs and whatnot. The infantry is nice, but it kind of suffers from that same thing of just being low HP. So if you're facing opposing units like a 10-man dragon squad that's already gotten to a building, your infantry is just going to get deleted before you can even get to that building. Sometimes you'll even lose the fight if you're already in the building and the other unit's already in the building. So there's that as well. You also don't really get a good IFE. Like you get the BMPs with the 17 pin missile, but they're not that great. They're kind of overpriced for what they are right now. Um, you can get some decent helicopters. You get like a really good air tab with this division. The only thing you don't get is basically like a good fighter, so it kind of suffers from if air's being used against you, you're having to rely on like Kubar and G to take out opposing planes because you don't really have that good ASF. But what you do get though is a very good Su-22 seed plane and a very good two cards of Su-22 ATs. So you can deal with like BVs and 1A1s with those AT planes. They are very very good at that because your T-72s are going to struggle in those positions. Also, just T-72 is not really a great tank. Like price wise, they look like they're good, but just when it comes to accuracy and getting shots, it can be quite the painful experience. I've had tons of games where I have a T-72 within 1,000 meters and I just miss the shot point blank, and then I get counter shot by like the M1A1 and just die in one hit. It's quite painful whenever that happens, especially when it's 2 or 3 times in the same game. It really makes you question things. Um, but I still like Seventh Panzer. Like it's well rounded. It's just you really kind of feel the weakness of that low range tank gun, especially when you get on maps like Airport and you don't really have any long range ATGMs to use against other divisions. You really kind of just start getting bullied with your T-72s because you're always having to take that first hit before you can engage the enemy armor, and generally leads to losing engagements. But from there, we got first armored British division C tier. I really think this division. It kind of depends on how you play it. Like you can do an air spam type of play style with it, which can be pretty effective, but all RNG when it comes to air combat. So you know, it kind of goes there. But like the infantry of this division, it looks good on paper, but it's really not when you compare it to most other divisions because you don't really have that RPO unit or that flash unit or that flamethrower unit. So when it comes to like defending towns and all that, if your opponent gets into the town, your infantry just isn't cost efficient enough to continue those fights. Really, like you just kind of need to stop buying the infantry at that point because then you're just fighting a losing game. Your warrior appliques are good. They have a really good Milan 2 on top now. They're pretty cheap for what they are. I just don't think it really does enough for this division. Just because the tanks, oh, the tanks, when they get stunned down and start losing cohesion, just that rate of fire just really kills you. It really, really kills the chieftains and the challengers. And I find them to basically be perhaps the worst tanks in the game because of that. Just because the rate of fire is so slow. So just if you're facing a BV or an M1A1, uh, you basically just need to smoke after you get hit because you're just not going to be able to win that fight unless you have like two for every one tank or something. It's just it can be very painful, especially when the crits start rolling in. But anyways, good air tab, okay infantry tab, but like not great when it comes to city fights because you're not cost efficient enough. Having the law 80 is nice and all, but not when it comes to fighting other infantry. You're also your forward deploy. You just hardly get any of it. It's all low vet anyways, so like I wouldn't even use it. Your AA is also not the best. You do get the tornadoes to basically help, uh, keep air supremacy and whatnot. Um, but if you're not using those, tracked rapiers really just aren't that great. And yeah, I feel like the division's main weakness though is just with the infantry. Never really see anybody playing it either, so I haven't matched up against it too often. But the last game I played against it, the guy tried to use a bunch of air, and while it worked in the beginning, then the AA started actually getting the hits I needed it to, and then his whole game plan just kind of fell apart from there. But then we go to Berlin or Berliner. Um, Also, fun division to play. It's just extremely weak compared to most. Like you get a lot of good, cost-effective infantry units. It's just that's kind of all you get. Like your planes are good, but they're only 8 HP for the most part. Like your bombers and your napalm ones and all that. Some even less actually, 6 HP. You get your Su-22s, which can be nice, um, but you don't get a good fighter. You have to rely on coops again. Your A also just really isn't that great overall. You only have like base T55s and TO55s, one card of TO55s to basically be your armor. Lots of AT guns, which currently aren't that great. Um, so you're having to basically just lean on your infantry with your terrible AA. And if you face a division that has really good helicopters or really good aircraft, you can kind of see where that starts to going. Same with like decent armor, or something like 5 easy here with lots of autocannons to destroy that AA. You kind of start losing the battle because then you just don't have like enough ATGMs. You can only get one Conquerors card, one Metis, and that's all the ATGMs you can get besides just the standard 17 pin ATGM, which isn't really great when it starts to become fighting medium tanks and whatnot. So I feel like you get bullied here if you don't capture your main objectives at the start because it's very very hard to push with this division unless you're just constantly smoking everywhere. The SPWs you get are pretty nice for the opener. Like you get a ton of SPWs that you can use as fire support and whatnot, but it all kind of depends on the opener because late game you have no pushing power with this division, and it's easy to exploit that way. And yeah, that leads us to our last division, 119th here, which I currently think is like the worst division in the game. Probably not the worst. In my opinion, though, it's still probably C tier. I wouldn't put it out of C tier above anything else here. Mainly because you have no ATGM infantry. ATGM is very strong. Every other division in the game gets ATGM infantry. 119th does not get ATGM infantry. They did buff the stealth of the BRDM conquerors though, so that is nice. Now has good stealth. Uh, Kind of use that as your ATGM infantry. It's 65 points. Pretty good unit though. So that has helped kind of buff it a little bit. Rapiers though really aren't great. Lots of lining issues with those. You have lots of decent helicopters in this division, uh, but again, it's kind of hard to keep them alive because Tunguskas seem to really struggle against like aircraft with the main gun not really firing, and then the Saklos missile firing, and then it's just like you really need like three Tunguskas to just get the planes clear. You have your Su-27s, your MiG-29s to hold the sky, but you got to keep those flying around constantly because an LGB plane will just come and kill your T-80U as soon as it comes out on the field. So basically, every time you have a tank that's exposed, you need to be flying an ASF around. And then that leads us to the infantry, which you can get some cool infantry like Spetsnaz OP, um, standard Motostrelki and BMPs, lots of superior RPO, but I mean, you only get 5 slots, so uh, depending on your choices, you can like have a pretty low amount of infantry, and once your infantry is kind of getting killed off, it's very very hard to kind of scout those positions of the enemy, and you don't really have a mobile artillery piece, so you're having to constantly move around your artillery if you want to fire at the opposing Totus and whatnot, and got to constantly move from counter battery. Burntino is really not worth it at all. Would not recommend that. Um, but yeah, it just 119th elite just gets bullied so hard in the early game by not having any type of like flank defense. It's just so easy to catch out a 119th player in the first 5 minutes. However, if you get in matchups where the opposing player isn't very aggressive and all that, then 119 turns into like the strongest division in the game. It's just kind of all about that like first 5 minutes. If you're playing an aggressive player, you're screwed. If you're not playing an aggressive player, you might be all right. But yeah, I'll leave my thoughts there. I hope you guys like this video. Only went 40 minutes this time instead of 3 hours, so I'll consider that a win. And I'll catch you in the next one. Have a great day.